What's up, you guys? I'm Dan, this is Frugal Not Cheap, and today we'll see if we're saving enough for retirement. Are you starting investing or thinking about starting investing for your retirement? How do you know if you're putting enough away? A lot of the messages that you'll get out there in the media tell you to save some percentage of your income, say 70% of your income or 80% of your income or something like that. This is stupid. So why do I think it's stupid? It's because embedded in this assumption, obviously, is that you're going to be YOLOing it and spending all of your income. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to save such a large percentage of your income. But you guys are not the average consumer sucker, and so you're not spending every penny that you earn. You're going to be doing better. And then that begs the question, if it's not our income, then how do we determine how much we need to save for retirement? And the obvious answer, the more obvious answer, is lifestyle. It's our spending. If our retirement savings are there to pay for our lifestyle in retirement, then it follows that the less expensive our lifestyle, the less we need to save for retirement. It also turns out that we actually end up spending a little bit less than we did before retirement once we actually retire. That sounds surprising at first, but when you think about it, it actually makes sense. A lot of the costs that you have now while you're working are actually related just to working and having your job. For instance, you need professional clothing. You won't be able to wear jeans and t-shirt every day at work, perhaps. There might also be dry cleaning costs, and that can be pretty expensive, and updating your wardrobe. And then you've got your commute, which when you really look at all the costs, and this is why you may have heard of the IRS mileage reimbursement rate, this is actually a pretty good calculation that takes into account things like depreciation, wear and tear on the vehicle, your insurance costs, everything. And they've come up with 56 cents a mile as the current mileage reimbursement rate. So that's a good way to get an idea of about how much it actually costs you, costs the average person with the average vehicle to go out there and drive. Oh, gasoline costs are included in there, of course, but I wanted to point out the less obvious ones. Okay, so you've got clothing, and then you've also got transportation. These things are increased costs because of work. The other one is housing. You might be living somewhere very expensive in order to be close by to where all the jobs are and where your current job is. Whereas if you didn't have that, you might live somewhere a little bit more rural or a little bit further outside of the city. So once you retired and didn't have your job anymore, you might be able to move outside of a high cost of living area and into a low cost of living area. And then we have another classic example of workplace spending is your lunches, right? Oftentimes there's some social pressure to go out for lunch together, that kind of thing. I would say no, do the brown bag, right? I personally did that when I was working as well. Although in my current job, I'm very lucky that we have lunch catered, so I don't have to worry about it. Well, I did when I wasn't working from home. Now they give us a stipend, which is awesome. Thank you, job. Really appreciate it. Anyway, so no to going out to all those lunches. I'm trying to, be a little bit more frugal perhaps. But anyway, there is a potential additional expense there. And even if you do brown bag it, then there could be other work type functions or things going on at work, little additional costs like, I don't know, the Girl Scout cookie drive or whatever, right? There might be some other things that come up that are little expenses here and there as well. Anyway, so what we find is that after you've retired and you no longer have these costs, once you've taken care of some of the initial sort of pent-up need for travel or checking off some bucket list items and that kind of thing, then the spending does tend to drop off, and it remains relatively low compared to the working life until we get to the end stages of life where we have more medical costs and that kind of thing. Okay, so how much do we need? Well, why don't we continue with our example? So a few videos back, we looked at how to make a budget, and there we looked at the median U.S. adult, and we looked at all their median expenses and their median income as well. So why don't we use that example, just take it a little bit further, and we'll now see what that person would need in order to retire and fund their current lifestyle. So if you haven't seen that, feel free to check out the how to make a budget video, give you some context and hopefully some helpful tips as well. So here we have our expenses, and let's round them up to $30,000 in order to make it easy. Obviously, your lifestyle in retirement could be very different. In this case, we're looking at a single person with a one-bedroom apartment. Your lifestyle might be quite different. You might have, you might have bought a home. Hopefully by the time of retirement, you would have paid off that home, and then you'd be left only with property taxes and insurance as your expenses. expenses, so your overhead could actually be quite lower even as you owned a home by that time. If you hadn't paid it off, you might have the mortgage, so we could put that in there in the place of rent. But either way, so some of the expenses would be a trade-off, but we can just adjust these numbers in order to fit the lifestyle that you have in mind for your retirement. Quickly though, I would also point out that if you're thinking that renting forever is kind of like throwing away your money, there is always the thing to remember that having all this money tied up in real estate, which on average only rises at the rate of inflation, is a big opportunity cost against, let's say you had cheaper rent versus that, then you could deploy that money into your investments and grow those at a rate of 7 or 8% after inflation instead. So there is that opportunity cost there. All right, so how are we going to pay for our $30,000 a year lifestyle? Well, in the past, there was always what was known as not always, but in the past, there was what was known as the three-legged stool of retirement income. So you had, of course, your Social Security, right, once that was enacted, and then you also had your pension at your company. This was much, much more common that you'd have that. And then lastly, you'd have your self-directed savings as well. And of course, one of those two legs of the stool has been knocked out. Those pensions are gone. For the most part, if you're a union worker, you might have a pension, or a municipal or city government worker. But generally, we're left just with Social Security and also with your self-directed savings. So we can see here that the current number of people that have defined benefit pensions is very, very low, around 2%. But this isn't all necessarily bad news. There was one big problem with these defined benefit pensions, and that was that you were relying on the pension provider, the pension fund, not to go, basically to be solvent throughout your retirement. And when you had all these risks tied up to all these individual companies, then there's a heavy amount of risk in there. And even now, if you have a municipal pension or something like that, you would do well. I would encourage you to look at how well your pension is funded, what the health of the funds are, what they're doing in order to keep those things in line over the future. In fact, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching a Frontline documentary about the teachers' pensions in Kentucky. I'll link that in the description below. It's really, really a good watch. So anyway, with that pension leg stool gone, that leaves most of us here in the US with just the two sources of Social Security and our self-directed savings. Now I know in other countries it might be different. You might have sort of a government type of pension system. I think in Australia there's sort of a hybrid of the 401k, but it's all run by the government, called the superannuation. I'm not sure I've got the details right on that, so don't quote me. But anyway, different countries have different systems, but hopefully there is something in there that's helping to provide some income for some income for you in your old age. And as far as the self-directed savings, we've got, your basic savings accounts, but also the tax advantage vehicles that we talked about in our Getting Started Investing video. So you've got your 401ks, IRAs, health savings accounts also can be a place to put in some investments, which is crazy, and then also your brokerage account as well, of course. Now in Social Security, of course, there are a lot of opinions about, whether or not the program's going to be in there in the future, but let's be real about this. The people that benefit from Social Security also tend to be the most active voting bloc of the population, and so it's very, very politically, there's a lot of pressure in order to keep this program going. I think also, on a personal note, it seems like a good thing, right? To provide a floor on the dignity of people's lifestyles in retirement, regardless of, what kinds of misfortunes that may have come up, between now and that time. I think it's a great thing that we can do for our people. Anyway, so later on what we can do though is we can still count on the Social Security income, but maybe not at the full amount. We might discount it to some degree, say, 75, 80% of the full amount or something like that. And depending on your view, you can feel free to use a different discount rate on that. All right, so how much can we count on for Social Security? Let's do the math. So in our example, we had the median adult that was earning $36,000 a year. And the Social Security Administration actually has a really handy benefits calculator. Let's say you were born at the beginning of January 1999. If you earned $36,000 a year, your retirement age benefit would be $1,082 in today's dollars. So everything that we'll do will be accounting for inflation. So just you can forget about that factor. All that will be accounted in the numbers. Otherwise, the nominal numbers would be a lot bigger and it'd be hard to compare. Okay, so that comes out to $12,984 a year. And like we said before, before. Maybe there's a bit of a funding crunch and there's a need to sort of cut back on the payouts in the future. So let's cut off 20% and say that we're going to receive 80% of the full amount. That's still just under $10,400, but let's call it $10,000 to make it easy. With our $30,000 budget, this takes care of a full third of our needs. Now we just need to find the other $20,000 a year and we'll be all set. So how much do we need to save in our self-directed investments in order to fund this $20,000 a year? Well, let's do something very conservative to just get a rough idea, right? Let's assume that we're going to be saving money in a way that is going to earn every year just enough to keep up with inflation, right? So it's not going to take a whole lot of risk in order to get a return that provides, say, the 2 to 3% or so that we need for that. And we're going to retire at 65. Let's say we're going to be lucky and we're going to live to the age of 95, and so that gives us a 30-year retirement. In that case, we need the $20,000 times the 30 years, again assuming that our money is going to earn at least the rate of inflation, so we don't have to worry about that factor, and so that's $600,000. So again, if we wanted to live a more extravagant lifestyle, this could be higher, so you can make adjustments based on your desired lifestyle in retirement. Now the good news is, our retirement portfolio, as long as it's invested not terribly conservatively, should do much better than the rate of inflation, and so actually we don't need to save the full $600,000. There's a famous study on the survivability of a retirement portfolio, and what they did is they looked at different allocations between stocks and bonds. So they had very conservative allocations with a small amount of stocks, and very aggressive allocations with a large amount of stocks relative to bonds, and everything in between. And they looked at historical stock market data to see if you retired in any given year within this long time frame under study, whether or not you could withdraw a certain amount from your portfolio called the safe withdrawal rate. So the same percentage every year you would withdraw out of your account. You'd sell off some stocks, spend that to fund your lifestyle, and the next year, adjusted for inflation, you'd withdraw the same amount from your portfolio and then go about your business. So they did that for this long time frame, and they were able to calculate these safe withdrawal rates for different stock bond allocations of your portfolio. And for anything that was at least, say, 50% bonds, we had very good success rates at a 4% withdrawal rate over a period of 30 years. There has been work done since the time the Trinity study came out to update that to reflect the stock prices, the stock valuations, and growth that we've seen in the market since the study was released, so kind of just bringing it up to date. But there's also been work to look at what the safe withdrawal rates would be for different portfolios internationally. You can see there's quite a wide range of variability. In some countries, their domestic stock markets did not perform nearly as well as the US market. But for many of the Western economies, you can see here that we had some pretty decent withdrawal rates in the range of between 3 and 4% or so for most of the sort of medium aggressive, sort of pretty balanced, I'd say, stock portfolios. And of course, the beauty of it is you don't have to invest all your money in your home country stock market. It can make sense to do that in terms of inflation to some degree, but you know, you're welcome to invest in companies from around the globe, and in fact, that's what I do. So my portfolio is composed of US shares and then also non-US shares, so the international global stock market, basically. Now, what safe withdrawal rate, so the percentage of your portfolio that you'll cash out and use to spend every year, that's going to depend on, of course, your retirement horizon, how long your retirement you expect to be, and then also your personal risk tolerance. You might be a lot more risk averse than I am. You wanted to use a 3% rate, so you're taking off less out of your portfolio every year, or you might be a little bit more gung-ho and do a 4.5% or a 5% rate. But then knowing that you might have to, when the market's not doing well, cut back on your spending in order to keep things in line, right? So there is some flexibility there. You know, these studies all assume that you do a fixed 4% after inflation, but there's always room, you know, when the stock market's not doing well. We've had like the COVID pandemic last year in March. You might have at that time just said, hey, I got to buckle down, cut down my spending. And so you might have done more like a 2.5% or 3% rate for a little while. And then once the market recovered, then, you know, later in the year, then you would have bumped it back up to the 4%. So, you know, there's always some wiggle room and some ways to add in extra safety margin for your retirement. Anyway, let's go with the classic 4% rate. To fund our $20,000 a year that we need, we would take that $20,000 and divide it by 4%, 0.04, and that gives us a nice even $500,000. So we've cut down the amount that we need to save compared to the sort of the cash version, which was $600,000, right? The very conservative portfolio, right? So we need $100,000 less, or 1/6 less, about 17% less. All right, so how are we going to save this $500,000 by the time that we retire at 65? Let's say that we're starting at 21. This is going along with that Social Security retirement calculation where we used the birth year of 1999. So we've got 44 years. Using the handy compound interest calculator from investor.gov, we can see that we only need to put away $160 a month in order to achieve a portfolio of $500,000 by retirement. That's less than $2,000 a year that we need to save. Again, you might want to live a more extravagant lifestyle than we budgeted for, or you might be worried about some medical costs that could come up from hereditary issues in your bloodline. You'll just need to increase your savings target to match and save more in order to reach that target. If, instead, we save $300 a month or $3,600 a year, we'd end up with a $958,000 portfolio. This would fund $38,000 plus our $10,000 in Social Security means we'd have almost $50,000 in retirement income. So I hope this video has made the task of saving for retirement sound a lot less daunting for you. And I hope it's given you the tools that you need to put into place a plan for your retirement. If you want to learn more about the portfolio selection and the investing component, I highly suggest checking out my Getting Started Investing video. It's full of information to give you the knowledge that you'll need. Again, I hope today's video was helpful. Thanks very much for watching. If you did like the video, hit the like button, really helps out the channel. If you'd like to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button. If you want YouTube to let you know when new videos are posted, ring the notification bell icon, and I'll see you in the next video.